Thank you for tuning into Literary Blend, a publishing podcast. I'm your host, Demi Michelle Schwartz. There's no perfect recipe for chasing a dream in the publishing industry, but I hope the conversations on this show give you the ingredients you need to bake yours into reality. So let's flip the page and get into this chapter of Literary Blend. Hello friends, welcome back to Literary Blend. Today's chapter is called Subjectivity and Marketability, and I'm delighted to be joined by a true ray of sunshine in publishing for a chat about this topic today. Please welcome Rachel McMillan. Hey Rachel.
Hello, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, I'm delighted to have you. How are you doing today?
Good.
Fabulous. Well, I'm so excited to have a chat with you about subjectivity and marketability in publishing. But before we dive into that chat, I would love for you to share a little about yourself and your journey in the industry so far.
Yeah, so I'm Rachel. I live in Toronto, Canada. Basically, my entire life has been books. I went and did a postgraduate degree in publishing. I've worked as an assistant manager of an indie bookstore. I worked for 11 years in corporate publishing in the educational sphere. And for the past 6 years, I've been a literary agent, but I also am an author of over 20 traditionally published books, including several historical novels for HarperCollins. So I've basically seen publishing from every last viewpoint. But the most important thing in my life is I am a voracious reader and book gusher. And you can't do anything in publishing without being a true book lover. So that's why I enjoy making the book community where I hang out, so that we can all kind of promote each other's work and we can help each other, because publishing is a really complicated world. And the more help we can give each other from the agent and author perspective, the happier we're all going to be.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, congratulations on all of the success you have had. I love that perspective of how everybody just loves books. We're all readers, and we wouldn't be involved in publishing if we didn't love books. So, returning to our love for the art is always really important.
It is, especially because very few of us will ever be able to do this as our sole job. And I think that's really important for authors getting in the industry to know. We're all going to have to do a few different jobs in order to have the privilege of publishing books. And so if you keep that at the forefront, it manages some expectations on your own publishing journey.
Really, really great point. So let's transition into our chat about subjectivity and marketability. And first, I want to talk about how publishing is very subjective, and this can have pros and cons. So, first, for the positives, in your opinion, why do you think publishing being so subjective is a good thing?
Publishing can inform a lot of trends. It has the power to inform trends in what we consume. And it has the power to break genre barrier. Since COVID, since the lockdowns, we've been seeing an absolute rise in romance. Romance has been taking over the New York Times bestseller list. For many years, it was seen as something people would hide the cover of behind another book on the subway, or would buy the ebook of so they weren't flashing, but they were reading. Now we're seeing that publishers are picking up that people want those wonderful escapist reads. And there's something so legitimate about readers shifting that tone. So I think that when it comes to embracing things like diversity, inclusivity, that's where the subjectivity and what publishers are wanting to publish is the most helpful. Or if there's a major historical event that becomes popular and everybody wants to read about it, it can't help but expand our mind and how we engage with each other. So that can be a pro. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's really great you brought up the readers, because at the end of the day, authors are writing books, books are getting published, but the readers are the ones buying them and reading them and sharing them. So it's really interesting to see how times change and the world changes, and what's going on around us can influence the kind of books that are being read, and also contributing to what publishers are starting to seek out as well. And one other thing that I wanted to add too is just from the author perspective, and I'm sure you can agree with this too, that it's nice that publishing is so subjective, because you will find readers for your book. If you have a target audience, if you have a reader in mind, that reader is out there. And so, even though it's not for everyone, if you believe in that story and you know others who may like it as well with the target audience, you can get that book to the readers who will love it too. And so, there really is a book for everybody. And so, I think that's one of the great things, that we don't need to write books that appeal to everyone. We just need to find the readers for us.
Absolutely. And to just carry on with that, that's why now more than ever, there are so many different avenues of publishing. There are independent presses, there are small presses. There's a far bigger world to reach readers than merely the quote unquote big five publishing houses. There's independent publishing. A lot of indie published books make more money in a year than traditionally published books. So there are so many avenues for reaching your perfect reader without having to jump through all the hoops of getting an agent and getting an editor to champion your book. But in the same way, the negative of subjectivity is that the market can change while people are still writing. And while TikTok has been amazing in proving that readers are still driving the marketplace by word of mouth, because that's why Colleen Hoover is so popular, that's why Tessa Bailey is so popular, they're absolutely driving the marketplace, but also inspiring publishers to try and fit the TikTok mold. And that leaves out a ton of readers. So subjectivity can be difficult because it means that a lot of people who set out to write the book of their hearts might not get to do so in the time they'd like, because the market is driven by trends. So
Yeah.
that's one of the cons of that model.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think going off of that as well, it's sometimes difficult to know exactly what people want, what people like, especially what Crane, like what agents want to see in the letter, and different opinions on, is the inciting incident too soon, too late. I can't tell you how many times while I was querying that I got such conflicting advice, and from that perspective, it was a little difficult at times to figure out what exactly to do, because I was getting all this different advice from a bunch of different directions. And so subjectivity is great in many reasons that we touched on earlier, but it can also be difficult when someone's trying to get their foot in the door, see what publishers want, what agents want, what editors are looking for, and getting that conflicting advice and having to make a decision to best fit what you're trying to do, while recognizing that it may not be the best decision because you're getting all of this different perspectives coming from all different directions.
And one thing to note is that that's something that doesn't go away once you get a contract.
Right.
So the publishing world is built in that you'll get rejections by agents, then you'll get rejections by editors, then you'll get rejections by readers, then you'll get rejections by your cover and title team. I've only been able to keep one of my titles. That's something that a lot of pre published authors don't always know. They have title committee meetings that are driven a lot by marketing and sales. My first book that got me my first contract, the editor who acquired it had me rewrite it from third person to omniscient first. So there's a lot of things that keep driving after you're contracted. And so I think that's something to keep in mind. And when we talk about subjectivity and how you're getting different responses from different agents, that is something that, again, editors are the same when you're out on sub. But if you think about all the books you read, you don't love all of them for the same reasons, or you don't like a book that somebody else loves for a certain reason. And that same subjectivity informs agents. So, your excellent point about getting conflicting viewpoints, I would instead, if possible, if you're getting different things, pick a few common themes. If you're seeing the same thing a few times, that's usually when to tweak something. If it keeps coming up, but I get it, because I know that I've given feedback on something that someone has queried me for, and of course they're going to get a different answer. And that's why it's so important to just really trust your instinct, but also vet the people you are querying, because it is a subjective industry, and you want somebody who's being subjective with your work for the right reason.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's great that you brought up how this doesn't stop, it's always going to continue. And even when you're like in the drafting stage and sharing work with beta readers, critique partners, you get conflicting feedback all the time. And I think that just drives on the point what you said about, readers approaching things from different perspectives, backgrounds, experiences, having their own personal preferences. And I always try to think about, like when I was queer, and I try to keep the mindset that when I'm going to read a new book and I'm scrolling through iBooks on my phone, reading blurbs to see what I want to read, there are ones that jump out at me and there are ones that I know in 2 seconds from the first sentence that it's not going to be for me. And I just needed to get it in my head that all these books that I'm looking at on iBooks, they were published. They found their homes, they found champions. And so I just needed to remember that it's okay if I don't like all the books I'm scrolling through, and it's okay if not everybody likes mine. And it's just finding the readers who do and finding the agent and publisher that do as well.
Absolutely. And one thing I always tell my clients is they're allowed 2 beta readers and that's it. Because anything more than that, and you get too many cooks in the kitchen. And an editor at a publishing house, their job is to make that book the best version of your story. So if you have too many people contributing to something, it doesn't allow an acquisitions editor at a publishing house to truly do their job and for you to form that amazing partnership that so many of us, including myself, have with our editors. So that's something to keep in mind. And remember, queries are a job interview application. So I want people to always reframe in their mind to highlight the subjectivity. So remember, often rejections, I hate the term rejection, I prefer the term pass, often passes from an agent are nothing to do with your writing talent or ability. It's fitting what they need in a gap in their manuscript wish list or their client roster at a certain moment. And that can be hard for authors because you can be doing everything and seeing their manuscript wish list and thinking this is perfect for them, but they've already got a book on sub that's just a little too thematically similar. This industry is not for the faint of heart.
No, no, absolutely not. So, something else I wanted to talk about is during the process of writing the book, getting it revised, whether to query or share with your agent, there is a side of personal preference in writing the book you want to write, a book that's in your heart, but also making sure that it is marketable. And so, what is your perspective of finding a balance of writing something you're passionate about while also making sure that it is marketable?
Well, this is really important. And something that everyone here should know is that it took me 8 books before I was able to write in my genre because the book that got me an agent has still never been published. It was a historical novel and it was passed everywhere. But editors at the time, 2016, really wanted historical mystery. So that shows a market trend. So my agent said, "Can you write a historical mystery series?" And I'm like, anything to get in the door. So I did 6 books at one publisher in one historical mystery and 2 at another. And then I was finally able to re up my contract with historical fiction without that mystery element. And what I did so that it was still a book of my heart, quote unquote, is I always make sure in my books to infuse them with things I'm really passionate about. So architecture is a big thing of mine, classical music. You might not be writing the book of your heart, but you can find a way to intersect your passion with market trends and meet in the middle. And you'll find that a lot of huge best-selling authors have had to do this. Kate Quinn is one. She's writing World War II and post-war fiction. Her passion is the Borgias and the Roman era, and you find ways to infuse what's selling while still having some integrity and authenticity to what you're passionate about. But it also depends, as we mentioned, on what your goals are. If your goal is just to get the book of your heart in front of people, there are so many avenues outside of traditional publishing in which to do that. Indie publishing, independent publishing, smaller presses. If it's to reach a big 5, you're often going to have to study the marketplace and figure out how to get in the door. And when you get in the door, start building that sales trajectory and have editors who are champions on your team, you have more leeway to start moving out of whatever got you in the doorway, but get in that doorway. So yeah, I'm the person who wrote a lot of mysteries. At least they were historical. I don't feel that they're my strong point, but you go where the jobs are.
Yeah, no, really, really great points. And I love how you brought up it all depends on your intent with your story. Because I think once you get into traditional, like you said, there are some sacrifices that need to be made. You're creating a book that you want to sell. Your book is a product. And even though it's art and it's close to your heart and you love it, you're still trying to sell it. And so I think it's really great to keep in mind that if you're pursuing traditional publishing, you need to have a good understanding of the market and what people are looking for, and writing something that you love to write, because if you hate what you're writing, you're not going to want to draft it. You're not going to want to keep revising it. So having something in that story that you enjoy, but also making sure it's somewhat tailored to the market. And I think also too, this is where comp titles kind of come in, because when you're querying, and especially like on sub two, like editors want to know like what is out there that's like your book. That's where you're kind of proving to the market, I wrote this book, but it can sit alongside these books too, because you need to let the ones who are helping you make that dream a reality with getting published know you wrote something that could potentially sell.
Absolutely. And comp titles, I believe, and I lecture on them a lot, are the most integral point of a query letter. They're how I sell a book to an editor for a client, and they're even how a client's book and advance are determined. And they're even a part of where the client's book ends up on the bookshelf. Comp titles, strong comp titles, set you apart from any other query in my inbox. And really good comp titles are 2 or 3 or 4 books that have been published within the past 2 to 5 years that are proven sellers and that show that you're slightly different, prove how you're somewhat different in the marketplace, but that you are going to sell. And that's because when you finally make it to the publishing board at a publishing house, an editor loves you, they take you to that final publishing board. The final say is always the salesperson. And that person will not have read your book. They are going to get a sheet that has potential revenue and why they think they can sell this. And they're going to make that decision. And if you've got strong comp titles, that factors into that meeting. So thank you for bringing up comp titles. They are my love language. They're so good.
That's so funny. Yeah, I think that also too, it just shows that number one, you are staying current with the market, and number two, that you're reading current books.
Yes.
Because for me, like the way I found my comp titles when I was querying was I was reading like a bunch of stuff in my genre. I wasn't just like Googling like search terms to find something that fit mine. I was genuinely reading books, and every time I read something that had a similar plot thread or similar tone or a trope or like something like that, I was like, maybe I can comp it to this. And then take 2 or 3 books that are like different and pull things from them, like the X of this meets the Y of that, like to prove to the agent, okay, these are the books that I can sit alongside, but the specific elements from those books that can help to determine where your book can fit into the market.
You're a dream. And for those who don't have time to read every book in their genre, I mean, read as much as you can, because you have to.
Yeah.
You can't do this job without reading. There are so many wonderful places to find it. I mean, you can study the publishers' marketplace deals every day. What's being signed right now? Study the New York Times and USA Today bestseller list. See something that might be near to what you're writing, and then curate your reading list based on what you're seeing pop up. Book Talk is a great way. Just going to Barnes and Noble or here in Canada, Chapters, and seeing what's on the table in your genre and seeing what people are focused on and buying. But that's a huge part of the marketability aspect, is proving that your book is unique enough that it fits a gap in the marketplace, but is strong enough as a sales potential that a publisher can imagine making money on it. So
right, absolutely.
such a good point.
Sure. Yeah. So something else I wanted to touch on is a hot topic all the time, word count, which I think definitely contributes to marketability if a publisher is going to take a risk, especially with a debut. So what is your take on word counts?
Okay, so first off, I just want to say, make sure when you're querying agents, you're not querying agents who represent every genre, because how can an agent be that good at every genre? right? There's no way we can have the connections in every genre or the market knowledge. So, with that being said, I will tell you straight up that I don't represent YA, fantasy, science fiction, or YA fantasy or romantasy. And I bring that up because those genres have exceptions to word counts. Often you can get away in YA fantasy with a book that's over 100,000 words. And this again is subjective, but I am going by all of the editors I work with and my 31 clients and all of the feedback we get. Right now, as a debut in pretty much every genre, to go over 100,000 words is an immediate no. If I get over 100,000 words in a subject line and a query for me, especially if it's for a women's fiction, a book club fiction, or romance, it's an immediate no. And that's partly because word count is actually built into your contract. So my contracts, if I go over 100,000 words, I have to cut. I had to cut 25,000 words in my last book because my advance was based on that word count because of print costs. And the cost of the book is based into that. And my royalty rates are. So word count is really important to study. A lot of this can be found online, but I think that you should have a gut instinct. Between 75 to 95 words is what you're going to see most books nowadays land at. If you want to write Harlequin romances or cozy mysteries, those are sometimes smaller paperbacks and sometimes in the 55 to 65,000 range. But I would say a good rule of thumb is to not go over 100,000 words, with a few exceptions in the fantasy realm. And to remember that if you can cut your word count to get between the 75 to 95 range, you have a much wider opportunity, not only with agents, but with publishers, because people cannot afford, given print costs, to print things that are that big, especially for a debut. I find that the longer you do things and build up your sales trajectory, meaning your books sell through or you're making money for the publisher, you get more leeway and you're able to, write books that are slightly longer because you've proven that you can sell them. So definitely pay attention to word count. And there are nice agents like myself on Twitter who people DM me and say, this is my genre, this is my word count. And I literally will try to help you if I can. If you just give me like a 2 or 3 lines, hey, Rachel, is this too long? I can tell you. So please find me if you need that answered.
Yeah, well, that's great. And I'm really happy you gave several specific reasons why word count matters. I think people would sometimes just think, like, oh, the agent doesn't want to read that long of a book or blah, blah. But there are genuine reasons why the word count matters. And I'm really happy you outlined this.
And remember, I see a lot of this on Twitter and I get it because people are frustrated. I'm an author too. And I really try to understand where authors are coming from. But agents are not saying this stuff out of the blue to make your life difficult. I think something to remember is that it's our livelihood too, and it's a very tenuous industry. And so when we take on an author, we're taking on their entire dreams and their career. And neither of us are seeing revenue from that until a book sells. So it's a lot of preemptive work without a guarantee. And I think that as much as we love the art, for me as a single woman in Toronto, I also still need to eat food and have a house. So I also want to say that most agents are just telling people what we're hearing from editors because we don't want to just send out a book that's never going to sell. You don't want that as an author. You want an agent who's actually going to land your book and get your dream. So we're not pulling these word count things out of the sky. We're in constant conversation and Zooms with editors at all the major publishers. What are the trends? What are you looking for? Where do you have a gap? And we're trying to fit that. So it's not us just hating you, at least not from my part.
No, I'm happy you said that too. And I think this goes back to what we were saying earlier about when you're pursuing traditional publishing, you absolutely have to listen to what the agents are saying and what the editors are saying because genuinely, like, trying to fight the system isn't going to get you anywhere. And I've had to change the title of the book I queried before going on submission because my agent said, I think you should change this. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll change it. Even though I was low key a little attached to the title from querying it and being just attached to the story, I knew that to give the book a better chance, changing the title would have been a good decision. And so there are times when you will have to give up a little bit of your control and listen to what people are saying, because if you are pursuing traditional publishing, you are getting into a space where business professionals, agents, editors, publishers, they know the business very well. And so when they are giving you guidance and suggestions, they are doing it from a place of how can we get this book to the best place it can be, not always personal preference. It's always to try to fit the market and help sell your book.
Absolutely. And it's really a lot about and with an agent, you should have a partner because you're in it together. I mean, you're totally in it together. It serves both of you really well if you place the book. So choose your hills to die on really well. um if you really are married to a setting or someone asks you to change something and you're just like, this is one thing I can't give up, most editors and publishers and agents within reason are going to say, okay, if you're willing to compromise on other things and this is super important, we can work with that. So please remember, and I know that I can't speak for all agents, anyone can be an agent now. It's just you can show up and try. But most of us just are really trying to work in publishing and trying to change the conversation because we know exactly how tough of a world this is.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of hills to die on, Oxford comma is mine.
I love that. Yeah. I honestly, if any agent passes on your query because you use or don't use the Oxford comma, they're not an agent you want to work with. Okay? Because how micromanaging is that? I mean, that's the least of our worries. And something I really wanted to bring up is that for me and with my clients, when I read your query, a lot of us don't ask for fulls or even a writing sample straight up because writing is one part of getting a book contract right now. It's not the whole thing. And the first book that gets an agent like my own may not actually get a contract. So I'm always looking for the author as a potential partner who has good ideas, who has writing chops, who has a query that shows they have an idea of the market, have a great hook, and then we can move on to the writing part. Because I'm more looking for someone who's a career author or someone I can work with for the long haul rather than one book I might get a huge advance on and the author can't sell through and it just dies in the water. So it's really important to remember that so much of this is about writing, yes, but about the bigger picture. And that's why, again, there's so many options in publishing for people. And if you want complete control, do not pursue traditional publishing with a big five house. If you want complete control, it's just going to disappoint you.
Yeah, no, really great point. And one of the lessons I wanted to mention, going off of something you said, is about how authors should go into traditional publishing with the mindset of a partnership and a long-term career. And truly, like I'm sure all agents are like this. On the call, one of the first questions my agent asked me was, what else are you working on?
Yeah.
Because they want you to have other ideas going, because if a book dies on submission, you're working on something else and they know that you can continue to crank out books for your life. So I think it's really great to go into it with the mindset that the book that you're querying or on sub first with, yes, you love it, but if it doesn't make it, that's fine. You can move on to something else, and always thinking of ideas, tailoring them to the market where you can, but also having an authentic approach just to keep yourself moving and keep writing, because writing is the massive part of all of this, no matter where you are. If you're indie, going with small press, agented, if you've been published before, you're going to still keep writing and writing and writing. And so having those ideas is really important.
Oh, always have something in your back pocket. And that's something I ask in queries. If I'm interested in pursuing, the first thing I do is like, do you have a few other book ideas? Because it's something that editors ask me too when a book is on sub. And if they're interested, they're like, okay, what else are they working on? They just want to make sure that there's potential for more than one book.
Yeah,
Write
absolutely.
books.
Perfect. So, just to wrap up on the chat here, what are final thoughts you would like to share on subjectivity and marketability in publishing?
I would say that, as I said earlier, it's very easy to be frustrated and hurt by this industry. And I know as an author and as a creative, it's easy to just say it's not personal. But I can tell you as an agent, it really isn't personal. I get hundreds of queries a week, and many of them are wonderful. The most times I pass on something has nothing to do with your talent. The main reason I pass on something is someone queried me in a genre I don't represent. So that's an immediate no. And I get, even though I tell everybody I don't rep YA or teen or kids, I get tons of those queries. So, hey, you've made it that far. You actually have pitched me in a genre I represent. Another reason I often say no is because I have a client who's written something similar in theme or subject, or I have something out on sub for a client, and I don't want ever for two of my clients to be in direct competition with each other. Third reason I might pass is even though I love the book, I have a rule that when I'm reading, I have to have at least 10 editors in mind for me to send it to. And even if, as a reader and a lover of words, I personally love the book, I have to think about, can I place this for you? Am I the right champion? And that's often why I pass. And in those instances, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the subjectivity of, can I place this? And you don't want an agent who's going to sign you and drag you around for years. You can go on agent websites and see their clients. Have these people had contracts, or have they been signed to an agent for 5 to 10 years and not sold anything? It's different if the author continues to write and you just aren't finding one book success. You try another, but don't sign with an agent just to have an agent. And so those are three things to keep in mind, that it's often not you, it's genre, it's whether we can champion it and we're the best people for it, or whether we can imagine the editors we're going to send it to. And if you keep that in mind, you're not going to think, oh, I'm a terrible writer and agents hate me, because that's not.
Perfect. Oh my goodness. Great pieces of advice to end on. Rachel, it was lovely having you on the show. And now we've made it to the fun part of the show called the plot twist, where I'm going to ask you a random question and it's going to
Ooh,
be fun. Are you ready?
yes.
All right, this is a fun one. I try to be extremely random, so here we go. So, if you could invent a writing themed beverage, what would you call it and what would the ingredients be?
Oh my gosh, that's so good. Okay. I would call it the romantasy, because I love to read romantasy, and it's such a big, even though I don't rep it, I love to read it. And I think it would have to have some kind of, because it's kind of whimsical and kind of romantic, it would have to have champagne in it, and maybe something lemon, because that's my favorite flavor, and maybe something raspberry. And it would have to be served in like a goblet that looks like it could be from any fantastical time period, and that would be my drink of choice, the romantasy.
That's
So
so perfect.
somebody go and create that, and we'll all make it.
Fabulous. Well, it's a joy having you. Can you please share with everybody where they can learn more about you as an author and as an agent?
Yes. So actually the best places to find me are Instagram and Twitter. My handle on both is Rach K Mick, RACHKMC. Instagram, Twitter, I'm always there. I do run throughout the year $5 Zoom sessions to make them accessible for people who can't get to conferences. And I do talks like everything you've wanted to know about publishing but we're afraid to ask, or comp titles or word count. I do a lot of that. So you'll learn about those, but you'll also, I try to give as much advice as I can on Twitter and Instagram, but I also try to focus on the positive. And I think more agents need to be doing that online. So if you come and find me, I try to be real, but I'm also not going to be cruel to querying authors. And I've seen agents shut people down publicly, and I just try to be the opposite of that. So you'll learn what I'm reading, what books I have coming out, but also what I'm seeing in the industry and any little query tips that I have. So stalk me online.
Yeah, no, perfect. Literally, what I said at the beginning, you're such a ray of sunshine. And you don't rep YA. I write YA. And like, I knew when I was querying that I couldn't even query you, but I followed you because you're just such a positive light. And
Oh,
there's so much negativity online. And I'm like, I'm following Rachel. She's great.
well, honestly, you don't want me repping YA because you want people who can actually sell it. And I do love to read it, but it's just not where I have. And careful with agents again, if they rep everything, there's no way that they have the connections or talent and everything. So just use your. And my DMs are open for publishing questions that you can't find an answer for. I really do try to give back to the writing community that way.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much again for joining me.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
For sure, absolutely. And that is a wrap on this chapter of Literary Blend with Rachel, all about subjectivity and marketability. If you enjoyed our conversation, please consider leaving Literary Blend a review and giving it 5 stars to help others just like you discover it. Also, if you have friends in the publishing industry you feel would enjoy the show too, please pass it along to them. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading and writing.